Forget what you know about investing because the rules have completely changed. Pokemon cards, which were once seen as a children's card game, have recently nearly outperformed most mainstream investing forms, and it seems people are now catching on. Though, has anyone ever stopped and asked, what on earth is actually happening? Because Pokemon investing as a term, right, it's been ridiculed ever since it rose to popularity. And I actually remember back a few years ago, it was actually a very niche community of people. However, it seems as the years have gone on, investing in collectibles is not only becoming more common, but more and more people are now buying into the process, and people now just genuinely invest in collectibles. I mean, if we look at something like a sealed Evolving Skies booster box from September of 2021, you could have purchased this box at around 110 USD. And right now in 2025, Evolving Skies booster boxes are currently selling for more than 1,600 US. That's a 13 times return on investment, which in the investing world is considered an elite return on investment. Though I suppose you could say, come on Phil, you're being cheeky. You're comparing the best set of Pokemon cards released in modern history. You can at least choose something a little bit more realistic to make a comparison point. And I agree, that's a fair point. So rather than me just sounding like I'm pulling out the best figures to try and highlight a point, I'll be walking you through some other data points in this video. Sorry. Data points. But more importantly, I'll actually be discussing how Pokemon investing has literally broken the rules and the reason why people are joining the hobby at an accelerated rate. Because there's been a pretty significant change. I mean, when I first heard of the word Pokemon investing many years ago, it was a very small community and the main people involved were just very hardcore TCG enthusiasts who knew that sealed products and certain Pokemon cards would slowly appreciate over time as more people reflected on the cards and as nostalgia grew. These were the pioneers of Pokemon investing. I mean, I remember sitting in Reddit threads discussing how Chilling Reign and Fusion Strike would one day grow, and a lot of us knew it would only be a matter of time, but again, it was just a very small and niche community. But lately, that kind of character of who used to invest in collectibles has completely changed. Pokemon investing has changed from hardcore collectors to people who are actually looking to diversify their investment portfolios. Collectibles have become a worldwide phenomenon. You can even see that with the Netflix show King of Collectibles, though it's more than just a trend. This feels like somewhat of a rebellion to the modern world. Almost like there's an unspoken movement taking place right now. When you think of Pokemon cards or collectibles, there's something tangible about them. And I kind of feel they've become somewhat of a millennial-led movement to this digitally plagued world. What's very important to understand is that the world has become like a digital kind of landfill. I mean, look at our lives, right? All our services have transitioned to subscriptions. Everything lives on the mysterious cloud. Gaming has essentially become an all-digital nightmare where we own these perpetual licenses to play the games. Physical media is literally on its last standing legs, and we've just accepted that we are at the end of the physical gaming era. And we've all just been okay with like a lifetime of renting. I mean, you've all heard it before. You will own nothing and be happy. But when you really think about it, right? Owning Pokemon cards seems to go against everything we like to think of modern society. We are in the middle of this minimalist, all digital, less is more ethos of the modern world. Though Pokemon cards actually go against this. It seems owning a rare Pokemon card or owning a sealed booster box is literally a rebellion led by millennials, because it's a reminder that owning physical and tangible products still matter. It's telling the world that actually owning something carries real weight. In a world obsessed with streaming, swiping, all these quick dopamine hits, we've got all of our subscription services. There's something about owning something rare that's tangible, and that's powerful right now. And more so, that's why Pokemon cards are becoming like a broken investment, because no one has caught on why we really feel like this, but we all understand that it matters. And that's the power of collectibles. No one is questioning why trading cards and collectibles are booming. Now, also, if you do enjoy Pokemon investing and Pokemon discussions, definitely feel free to subscribe. My name's Phil, and I cover a lot of topics relating to Pokemon collecting and Pokemon TCG. I'd love to have you on board the channel. Like, I know this sounds crazy, right? But if you think of playing a video game, when you actually own the game and play the physical version, it almost makes the whole gaming experience feel better. There's something about seeing the box art, physically holding the cartridge, hearing it click in, it kind of moves it from being consumption to connection. It's almost like we've added a level of mindfulness to the process, right? To me, everything that's digital and that lives on the cloud, it almost feels temporary and disposable. The small ritual of ownership makes a game feel like it truly belongs to you, and I feel this is why Pokemon cards are completely changing the way we see investment. But while we're on the subject of physical ownership, and before I get into some price comparisons of Pokemon booster boxes, I do want to cover today's video sponsor, which is Extra, who are leaders in smart wallet technology. And they've actually sent me 3 products, which are the Extra Finder card, the Extra Wallet Pro, and the card holder. So you can see here, I've got the Extra card holder, and you can actually fit up to 12 cards in here. And it also has an ejection trigger, which allows for super quick access to your cards. But here we also have the Extra Wallet Pro, and this is pretty impressive. You can actually comfortably fit 5 cards in here. Opposed to searching for them like traditional wallets, you can just click the trigger and they're here. Though one of the cool add-ons is the Extra Finder card. Now what's really cool about this is you can actually ring the Finder card and it integrates with Apple Find My. The card can easily fit in the back plate of the card holder or be placed in the wallet. Honestly, definitely feel free to check Extra out. And if you do like any of these products, what's really awesome is you can actually use my code Phillips Collectibles to get 10% off Extra wallets. A big shout out to Extra for being today's video sponsor. Now let's get back into the video. So honestly, I think what's really good is to do a deep dive in some of the figures and look at the price changes of modern Pokemon cards and how much they've actually grown over the years. All right, so I'm just looking at some of the price changes and price kind of shifts that have happened with Pokemon collectibles over the years. And like I said, I did mention Evolving Skies earlier in the video, and I don't want to just cherry pick everything. I do want to go over Moonbreon because I think that's an interesting card, but I'm also going to be going over some other products as well as really, really recent products so you can actually see how much some Pokemon products have changed over the years. And when you look at it, you can actually see, wait, the return on investment of these is actually wild, and I think that's why so many people are entering the hobby. But the first one is the Moonbreon, right? I'm looking at the raw copy here. Now, yes, I know this is one of the most iconic cards for modern Pokemon collecting, though I think it's a really awesome one to have here because this kind of shifted the paradigm of collectibles, right? I mean, even sports collectors and people who collect other TCGs all jumped into Moonbreon. They all got kind of just encapsulated by it. So I think it's a really important card to kind of discuss here. You can see here, right? In March 30th of 2022, a raw copy of Moonbreon could be found for 300 USD. Pretty expensive, right? Back then, people thought that was expensive. Though when we look at now in 2025, you can see Moonbreon costs 1,500 USD for a raw copy. That's around a 400% increase since 2022 and around 130% growth year on year. But fair enough, that is Moonbreon. That is an outlier, right? But when we look at something like Fusion Strike, this is where it gets interesting. Now, right now, Fusion Strike is expensive. But dude, believe me, Fusion Strike was on flash sales, man. You could find it so easily back in the day. It was nothing special for a very long time. In fact, it wasn't until 2024 that Fusion Strike saw some price growth. You can see here, in 2021, you could have easily found Fusion Strike for 110 US. You could even probably get it for a little bit lower, depending where you found. But I think $110 was the price for Fusion Strike back in 2021. You can see in 2025, Fusion Strike sells for around $740. That's a 570% increase since 2021, and we're looking at around 140% increase year on year. Huge kind of growth, right? That's just a sealed kind of booster box. Now, if you're wondering why, hey, if I pulled the Gengar VMAX, which is like the top chase card in Fusion Strike, you might be looking at the prices of that and saying, wait, it doesn't really make sense. Why is the booster box nearly the same price as the top chase card when it's so expensive and so rare to find? The reason for that is because sealed products begin becoming collectibles in and that of themselves. It's not anymore about, the chase cards inside. It's more about the preservation of a sealed booster box. Now, yes, Fusion Strike is very much in demand. But when we look at something like Chilling Reign, that's another great one to look at. Again, Chilling Reign was very easy to find back in 2021, 2022, even in 2023. It wasn't the hardest booster box to find for retail price. Chilling Reign booster boxes in 2021 were selling for around 110 US. In 2025, $440 per booster box. And that's still an impressive 300% increase with 75% year-on-year growth. So there you can see, right? Looking at Evolving Skies, looking at Moonbreon, Fusion Strike, Chilling Reign, all have had enormous growth. But fair enough, they're from the Sword and Shield era. But even when we look at Scarlet and Violet era sets just this year, check this out. So here I'm on TCG Player on Paldea Evolved. I'm gonna pull this into the year graph. You can see Paldea Evolved in May of last year was selling for around 128 US per booster box. Was pretty easy to get, right? Was slowly getting more in demand because back then Magikarp Illustration Rare was, the top chase card of the Scarlet and Violet era. It was a very desired card. You can see right now though, Paldea Evolved selling for $296 per booster box. That is a pretty impressive increase in 1 year. And that's only this year, right? Who knows where Paldea Evolved's going to go in the future? Yes, there is some words that we're going to get reprints of it, probably more stocks coming in the market. I wouldn't say that Paldea Evolved has actually finished its reprint window, but still you can see that there is a really common theme with Pokemon cards. Same thing when we look at Pokemon 151 ETBs. Check these out, man. You can see this was selling for 62 US in May last year. Pretty decent price for an ETB. Right now you can't find any new modern ETBs for that kind of price point. But you can see right now, Pokemon 151 ETB selling for $229. And you know what? A lot of people who invest in collectibles kind of could predict that, right? I don't want to sound like, oh, we're know-it-alls, right? But the reality is a lot of us knew that this would happen with Pokemon 151. I even have a video that I made in early 2024 called The 4 Reasons Why Pokemon 151 Will Become a Goldmine. That's because a lot of people who kind of collected cards knew that Pokemon 151 would be highly in demand. I'm not saying that to sound like, hey, I knew the answers, but the reality is when you're kind of involved in this, when you know Pokemon cards well, a lot of those TCG enthusiasts kind of could predict this. And that's why if you do follow this channel, welcome aboard. Definitely feel free to subscribe because you can kind of learn some of these insights, right? Now moving on to Twilight Masquerade. In the last year as well, you can see this was selling for around 105 US when it released last year in May. Right now, Twilight Masquerade selling for 232 US. So you can even see with newer products, they've still had an increase. Now, obviously we've had a Pokemon boom. This is a little bit out of the ordinary. Pokemon TCG Pocket made a lot of people come back into the hobby, but you can still see there is quite big increases. Now, also, if you do want to connect with the broader Pokemon community, feel free to join my channel's Discord server. You can actually speak with dedicated Pokemon enthusiasts and even be notified for channel giveaways. The server invite is in the video's description. And you know what? Even when we look at Paradox Rift, which would probably not be considered so desired for, Pokemon investors and collectors right now, it's kind of like, a lot of people would say it's probably a mid set, but you can even see Paradox Rift, right? This is selling for $101 in May of last year. And what's funny, if I could actually pull this even further back, I do know that Paradox Rift was actually selling for a low of 92 USD at one point as well. So it was actually even much lower than 101. But you can see Paradox Rift is also selling for $209. So a mid-tier set has also doubled in price, which is kind of wild to see. Pokemon cards and Pokemon collectibles and all this have literally changed. And I think the future is going to be interesting because I do think a lot of millennials, a lot of people are trying to hold on to this right now. They're seeing Pokemon cards, they've got the nostalgic connection, and it's almost like this collective kind of agreement that millennials have had is, hey, we're not going to let physical ownership die. You know what? In a world riddled with AI, in a world where everything lives on a cloud and everything's digital, you know what? I'm going to hold on to my physical products. And you know what? They're going to become expensive. And you know what as well? You're going to now join the journey and you're going to see how much people still value physical products. That's what it feels like Pokemon cards are at the moment. It does feel like a rebellion. It feels like people are holding on and saying, you know what? This is what we want. We want physical ownership and we're not going to let it get away from us. We're going to be the generation that fights for this and we're going to do it through nostalgic means such as Pokemon or, sports cards or, trading cards and collectibles. And it's a really interesting thing playing out right now. Though, like I said, it's interesting. And I think one day in the future, we're going to look back at this and it's going to make more sense as we kind of try to piece it together. Right now, though, we are in the middle of it and it is super exciting to be involved in the hobby. Though as much as Pokemon investing is changing, it seems it's seriously changed how investments are seen as so many people are now adding Pokemon and collectibles to their portfolios. Though here's the thing, there's a lot of mistakes which can be made when buying Pokemon cards, and I actually reveal these exact 5 mistakes in detail within this video here. Within this video that's appearing on screen, I go over the 5 Pokemon investing mistakes that every new collector makes. Click the video to ensure you can learn about these, and I'll see you on that next video.